This is Jed Disler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Consider subscribing to The Piano Maven through my Substack page, and I've posted a link in our episode description to do so. I probably have more Chopin CDs in my collection than any normal person needs, and these include some discs that probably no one needs. But there also are some Chopin discs in my collection that either you wouldn't have paid attention to when they first came out, or if you saw them, you'd think, why do I really need this? But I just revisited a recital of Chopin works by the pianist Rudolf Buchbinder that he made for the EMI label in 1986. And I think it's a really, really excellent disc. I was not aware of this release when it first appeared, but in 2004, EMI reissued the disc in its Encore budget price series, or maybe this was a mid-price series, I don't remember. Now, Buchbinder is most closely linked with the Austro-German repertoire. He recorded Beethoven's complete works for Telefunken, which became Teldec, of course, and he did two further Beethoven sonata cycles, one for RCA Victor, and then there was one that came out on Deutsche Grammophon a few years later. He recorded all of the Mozart concertos conducting from the piano with the Vienna Symphony, and that was for Profil, or was it for Hensler? I don't have the physical box right in front of me, but Profil is a label that is part of the Hensler family, and it's a fabulous Mozart cycle, one of the top ones in the catalog. And he also made those terrific Brahms concertos with Nicholas Harnoncourt and the Concertgebouw Orchestra, and that is a reference version, or very close to a reference version. And there are some Bach and Schubert discs with Rudolf Buchbinder out there. But Rudolf Buchbinder as a Chopin player, that's kind of like Alfred Brendel playing Rachmaninoff. Kind of inconceivable, right? Well, you are wrong, Vladimir de Pachmann-Breath. Rudolf Buchbinder is a most engaging and individual Chopin player, and he has strong ideas about the pieces that he plays. He breezes through the fantasy impromptu while making every phrase clear and with a definite sense of direction. And in the E-flat Nocturne, Opus 9, No. 2, he refuses to sentimentalize the music. Although he plays the D-flat Nocturne, Opus 27, No. 2, in a very slow and dynamically outsized manner, and the effect is not so much moonlit as it is dark and desolate. I kind of miss the grace and long legato lines that you get from, I guess, so-called standard performances of this nocturne. But it is still an interesting interpretation. Buchbinder proves equally brooding in the posthumous E minor Nocturne, Opus 72, No. 1. But here, there's more of a sense of a long line and inwardness. And it's a serious performance, but it's also very moving. Of the three waltzes that he plays, the Minute Waltz receives one of this hackneyed work's most dapper and perfectly proportioned performances I've ever heard. And it contrasts to the probing deliberation that Buchbinder brings to the C-sharp minor waltz and the B minor waltz. Now, at first, that big F-sharp minor Polonaise, Opus 44, in Buchbinder's hands seems kind of unidiomatic and literal and foursquare in its phraseology. But you have to admit that the pianist does not skimp on details. Those trills and ornaments, for example, are perfectly turned out, and those fast scales go exactly in tempo. The performance settles in more and more as it unfolds. But I would say that the third ballade is much more poetic and eloquent and genuinely singing and much more flexible. It's even kind of meditative. And the three equacies have all of the lightness and suppleness that one expects. However, I think that Rudolf Buchbinder saves his best Chopin playing for last and the final selection, which is the Scherzo No. 2 in B-flat minor. This performance has rhythmic vivacity and stinging accents, and the rhetorical touches enhance rather than draw attention away from Chopin's expressive subtext. And you notice this in the second theme in the opening section. And the trio section features some wonderful and rather unpredictable details of accentuation and emphasis that keep you guessing and keep you listening. There's a lot going on in this performance, and what pent-up fury Buchbinder unleashes in the second section of the trio and the big minor key climax that leads into the main theme's recapitulation. I would not say that this unusually dramatic performance is the best second scherzo that I've heard, because that's not a realistic thing to say because there's so many great performances out there. But the very individual profile of this interpretation really makes it stand out from the pack. So if you can find this disc, definitely grab it. And by the way, I only just noticed that Warner Classics issued a recording in 2022 with Rudolf Buchbinder playing the Chopin Preludes, and I didn't know about this release until just minutes before I started recording this podcast episode. So I definitely have to investigate Buchbinder's Chopin Preludes because, I'm very curious. But this 1986 mixed Chopin recital with Rudolf Buchbinder is a definite keeper, and really try to find it. You will not regret it. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings, and I look forward to being with you next time for the next episode.